This is the Razer ProClick V2 Vertical Edition. It's a unique mouse that offers high-end gaming performance in an ergonomic package. This is the third vertical mouse I've reviewed on the channel, and it might be the most polarizing so far. So buckle up, hit that subscribe button, and let's jump into the details. Starting with build and design, this mouse is large and has a very steep angle. While using the Logitech Lift and MX Vertical were fairly quick adjustments for me, getting used to the Razer Vertical mouse was much more challenging. I actually got this mouse way back in June, and based on an audience survey, a lot of you were curious about my thoughts. But this mouse was so difficult for me to use consistently that I kept having to put off my review process because I wasn't really giving it a fair shot on my desk. See, all ergonomic mice like this have a little bit of an adjustment period. They're meant to position your hand in a more natural position compared to a normal mouse. But despite it being natural, it feels pretty unnatural if you've spent years and years of your life using a standard mouse. This transition feels a little weird at first. Now, Razer lists the angle at 71.1 degrees, which might be accurate for this front portion, but at the back, it's essentially a full 90-degree vertical angle, and that's what you'll notice when you first use it. On the positive side, there is a solid ledge for your thumb to rest on, plus another ledge for the other side of your hand, which prevents your pinky from dragging on the desk. But this doesn't make up for the fact that holding this is likely to feel very odd for at least a few weeks. The materials used are high quality with hard plastic throughout, smooth on one side and textured on the other. The smooth plastic is nice, but it does have the ability to make your hand a little bit sweaty, which is something to look out for if you're prone to that sort of thing. Size-wise, the mouse is large and pretty heavy, weighing in at 150 grams, the same weight as the recent MX Master 4. It's also plenty big enough to support medium to large-sized hands, and could be a bit unwieldy for people with smaller hands. For usability, one of the biggest challenges resulting from the weight and the materials is a bit of a lack of grip when picking up the mouse. It's totally possible to make it work, but if you frequently pick up your mouse to make adjustments, you might find it a bit more challenging than you'd like. Moving to buttons and wheels, the main left and right clicks are mechanical switches rated for 60 million clicks. They have a traditional sound that's not terribly loud. In between the main clicks is the scroll wheel. This is a simple, tactile, line-by-line wheel with no real special features. It can't move into a free spinning mode, and unlike the regular Razer ProClick V2, there is also no tilt functionality for side-to-side scrolling. Thankfully though, it's also relatively quiet. On the side of the mouse are forward and back buttons that are rather unusually placed in a vertical alignment rather than a horizontal one. So the bottom button is back and the top one is forward. This definitely took some getting used to. In the end, after I adapted to it, it was fine. I definitely tend to use the back button more than the forward, and I will say that having it at the bottom is probably more efficient at times, but I can't say that I would specifically be an advocate for this type of a setup over a more traditional side-by-side one. But I am curious if you guys have any specific thoughts on that. The final button on the mouse is this top button, which serves as a DPI adjustment, jumping between pre-programmed intervals of sensitivity. There is a small light next to this button, which shows a corresponding color to help you know which DPI setting you're currently on. This button, along with the forward and back buttons, are clicky without being too loud. Overall, even though it doesn't use any silent clicks like Logitech or Keychron use on certain mice of theirs, the whole mouse is definitely on the quieter side and would totally be welcome in an office working environment, which is great. The sensor used is Razer's Focus Pro Optical Sensor, which is the same one used on the regular non-vertical Razer ProClick V2. It is definitely overkill for productivity work, but gives you the option to use this mouse as a vertical gaming mouse if you choose. In terms of specs, the sensor can go up to 30,000 DPI, meaning that it can get very precise. It can track on just about any surface, including glass, and it can also handle very fast movements with a maximum speed of 550 inches per second, or IPS, and a maximum acceleration of 40 Gs. For folks out there who don't understand all of that, essentially it means that you can make very fast mouse movements, and it should still be able to track you pretty accurately. For customization, this mouse uses Razer's Synapse software, a program that must be downloaded and installed to your computer, plus granted a lot of security permissions, at least on Mac, in order to make changes. This is frustrating since being able to use a web application is always the preferred method of making changes to any mouse or keyboard, in my opinion. However, even more frustrating is that you really can't take full advantage of this mouse without downloading the software. And the ways that you get limited out of the box are super annoying. I shared a lot of this in my review of the non-vertical Razer ProClick V2, and it's largely the same here, so apologies if this is redundant to anyone who's seen the other video, but it is necessary to call all of this out again. Thankfully, there is onboard memory on both of these mice, so you're not completely out of luck if you want to use one of these with a corporate computer that doesn't permit the installation of third-party software. However, you do need to have a second computer that you can download the software to in order to make the adjustments so that you can then bring them over to a corporate machine. There's much more to talk about in terms of what the specifics are for the software limitations, but those will come out in these subsequent sections. The first of those sections is a bit of an unusual item on this mouse compared to other ergonomic and other productivity mice. This ProClick model includes RGB lighting around the bottom. There is a single strip around almost all of the base of the mouse. It has 18 different lighting zones, which can be used in multiple different ways, from a single static color to a full-on RGB wave effect. This effect can be set to various levels of brightness and can be turned off entirely as well. There's a power saving mode called smart dimming, which either dims or turns the light off entirely as you use the mouse before returning back after 3 seconds of inactivity. Finally, you can set the lighting to turn off with your computer's display or after a set number of minutes. Plus, on the Performance tab of the Synapse program, if the wireless power saving mode kicks in at any point, it too will turn off the backlighting. So there is a lot of control here, however, only if you have the software. If you don't, you'll have single color lighting enabled by default that turns off when your mouse is in use, turns on after it's idle for 3 seconds, and then turns off again when the mouse enters power saving mode after 1 minute of inactivity. If you feel like the backlighting on this mouse is completely unnecessary, which I imagine many productivity-focused users will feel, you have to get the software to address it, which is frustrating. Next is connectivity, which has a lot to offer. There is 3-device Bluetooth, an included 2.4 gig Razer hyperspeed USB receiver, which slots into the bottom of the mouse when not in use. Plus, you can use the mouse in a wired mode. The wired and 2.4 gig connections are also capable of up to 1000 Hz polling rates, which helps to make this mouse a viable option for gaming. All of that is great, however, there are 2 annoying things about connectivity, and only one of them is actually related to the software. First, the controls to change connection types are a bit non-standard. There is a toggle switch between wired and wireless modes, then a single button to change wireless connections, whether that's 2.4 gig or Bluetooth. The only way to tell what connection you're on is to press the button and then look at the color of the RGB light strip. White is the connection to the USB receiver, blue, green, and yellow are the 3 Bluetooth connections. This works fine, but if you're ever troubleshooting with your connectivity issue, it's pretty annoying that there's no real way to tell what connection you're on at the moment without pressing the button, which then changes your connection to the next one in line, and then requires you to press the button a few more times to get back around to where you were. Overall, it's just a pretty annoying setup. The second annoying item is related to the polling rates, and it comes back to the Razer software. By default, when you connect with a wired connection or via the USB receiver, your polling rate is set to 250 Hz, not to the maximum 1000 Hz. So the only way to get the maximum polling rate is to install the software, which is super frustrating. You shouldn't have to install something to get the best performance out of your device, especially in a wired mode when battery life is not a concern. Speaking of battery, there's a rechargeable battery which can get up to 6 months of use on a single charge, which is very solid. There's an included 1.2 meter USB A to C cable, which is pretty good quality-wise, though nothing super special. The mouse is also fast charge capable, getting 3 working days of use with just a 5-minute charge, which is great if this mouse dies in the middle of your workday. However, just like in the last 2 sections of the video, the software gets in the way of battery life as well. Though it's not clearly communicated by Razer, I have to assume that the 6-month estimate of battery life that they advertise is at the lowest 125 Hz polling and with that backlighting turned off. I can definitely confirm from my own personal use testing this that if the lights are on, it will get way less than 6 months of use. So if you want the advertised battery life, you need the software. But there's more. Remember this wireless power saving setting that we talked about in relation to the backlighting? Well, since it fully puts the mouse to sleep, it also brings into play the sleep to wake speed. Now, if you're using the USB receiver, good news, it wakes up immediately with seemingly no lag at all. On Bluetooth though, it's almost unusable, requiring multiple seconds of jiggling your mouse in order to get a response. This power saving mode can be pushed out to 10 minutes, but once again, you need the software to do it. So yeah, this is not the most user-friendly mouse at all. So similar to what I did in my other Razer Pro Click video, here is a summary of the limitations if you don't or can't use the software. If you don't have the software, the advertised 1000 Hz polling rate is limited to just 250 Hz. The RGB lighting will be enabled, which will prevent you from getting the advertised 6 months of battery life. Plus, the mouse will go to sleep every 1 minute that it sits idle, and if you're on Bluetooth, it takes a painfully long amount of time to then wake back up. If you're able to use the software, you can fix all of these issues. Plus, you have the ability to adjust the behavior of any of the clicks or scrolls on the mouse, including a long click on the top DPI button, which by default will access Razer's AI Prompt Master. You can also use Razer's Hypershift function, which lets you use one button to unlock a whole additional set of actions. It's sort of like using the function button on a keyboard. You can also assign app-specific behaviors in addition to global ones. Finally, you can adjust all of the performance and lighting features that we covered already in the video, plus you can sync up RGB effects on multiple supported Razer devices as well if you've got this mouse in addition to a keyboard, for example. It's honestly a very feature-rich software program. It's just frustrating that it's required in order to really take full advantage of this mouse and in some ways to make it usable at all. For pricing, the Razer Pro Click V2 Vertical has an MSRP of $120. This is $20 more than the non-vertical version, but it is right on par with Logitech's MX Vertical, which I've also reviewed on the channel. The Razer is far more capable technically than the MX Vertical, which at this point hasn't been updated since its release over 7 years ago. So there's a good chance that you'll want to go with the Razer over the MX at that same price, at least until a potential MX Vertical 2 comes out. For cheaper alternatives, Logitech also sells the Logitech Lift, which is a much more basic vertical mouse and also a good bit smaller in size, and it's only $80. I've reviewed that one as well. Finally, the biggest competitor to this specific mouse is probably another fairly recent release, the Keychron M5. It's only $70, so it's a good price savings. It has an 8000 Hz polling rate, a thumb wheel for side-to-side scrolling, and it lets you customize with their launcher web app so you don't run into any of the same software issues. I don't have an M5 yet, but I am hoping to get one soon, so look out for some review videos and maybe even a comparison coming in the near future. But for now, let's summarize the differentiators and deal breakers. For the positives, this mouse has an ergonomic design that can certainly help to alleviate the stress associated with the hand placement that you use on regular mice. This is also one of the most vertical mice that I've ever seen, which could be great if you've ever thought that other vertical mice weren't quite steep enough for you. The specs on this mouse are quite solid and show the gaming-focused design from a company like Razer. In particular, this includes the high-end 30,000 DPI sensor and the 1000 Hz polling rates. Finally, the RGB lighting is unique and cool, albeit very unnecessary for a mouse, especially one aimed at productivity and at comfort. For potential deal breakers, the size is large and the angle may be a bit too steep for some people. It's hard to pick up the mouse, caused both by the angle and the rather slick materials on the sides. The forward and back buttons are in a non-traditional location. The scroll wheel is basic, line by line only, with no free spinning mode, plus no side scrolling or tilt functionality. The connectivity controls on the bottom of the mouse aren't really the best. The software is pretty much a requirement for this mouse, especially if you plan to use it with Bluetooth. Finally, the pricing is a bit on the steep side, especially compared to mice out there now, like the Keychron M5. So overall, assuming that you're able to install the software, you're probably not going to find another vertical gaming mouse with RGB anytime soon. But I'm not sure if those factors alone are going to be enough to convince many people shopping for a vertical mouse, especially if you identify with some of my software callouts and warnings. But let me know what you guys think in the comments, and while you're down there, consider a like or a subscribe if you made it this far in the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.